All right. So my first question is, does anybody have any proposed changes to the minutes of last year's annual meeting who was present at that meeting? Do we miss something or do we mischaracterize something? Did the tellers or helpers see anybody raising a hand?
I think Jama has a question.
Yes, Jama.
This is very minor. However, in the section about the youth group presentation, it was Meadow Sandoval and Emily Johnson that presented. It was not me.
Thank you. And if you downloaded the document this morning, that's what it says right now. But when it went up yesterday, that was a mistake. And then I think you also caught the other typo in the Deacon's report where Magdalene House for temporary moment was Magazine House. So thank you for that clarification. Other comments? So that's a good catch, but doesn't require us to formally amend the minutes. I'm sure there are other typos in this report, and you're free to point them out to Virginia in the coming week, and she will fix the annual report for posterity. So seeing no hands, I would say that we can accept the minutes of the annual meeting by acclamation, unless somebody objects and wants to have a vote on it. And not seeing any objection, I'm going to call on the senior warden to make a brief report for all the wardens for 2020.
Thank you, James. And yes, so I do intend.
Just make sure your cameras.
We're getting some echo, so I'm going to wait till we mute lines and then we'll keep going. Okay, I think we're good now. All right. Yeah, so there's your reminder that it's best if we can keep on mute as much as possible. And so that is something that the technical support will do from time to time. First, I really want to just share to you not the details so much of my report. I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it for yourself, but just try to uplift our community from my experience for the last 2 years. And the very first thing I want to say is I want to be thankful. I want to say thanks to James and be thankful for James because his initial areas of emphasis are in so many ways things that this community needed in order to process areas of deep pain and move forward as a community. And it's one thing to know that has to happen. It's another thing to have the skills, and it's a third thing to have the courage. And so I am thankful for James, and I am thankful for your support of all that we do here. I want to thank everyone who has worked as a warden alongside my tenure. So that is Phyllis and Chansa, and in this year, Carter and Candace with Victoria for a short period. And of course, I want to thank Sue Larson for her gentle encouragement from the beginning and at various times throughout this. She, among others, singularly understands what it's like to support a role as being senior warden. So very briefly, I just really want to recapture a couple ideas. And I'm not going to go over things like mechanics and property. I want to talk about our life together as people of God and people of various backgrounds. And as a point of self-disclosure, I have an entire side of my family on my mother's side that does not talk. When we talk about things like emotional cutoff, that's a nice way of talking about the things that they do to one another. I am the oldest of all the grandchildren on that, and there are cousins I've never met, and I'm going to be 46 in 2 weeks. And so for me, my baggage in life is to know that emotional cutoff, escape, and hiding are all things and tools that are powerful and are very, very tempting. And I think all of us can look at points in our life where we've learned that the risk of relationship is so much that when it does rupture, and it will, that it's just much easier to avoid them. It's much easier to make a scene. It's much easier to act in anger and rage and rupture that without any hope of repair. And so when I think about the opening scenes of Genesis, of a garden, of a God who is present among people and people who have suddenly done something that has caused them to feel shame, that encounter where we're told with this whole anthropomorphized way of God walking in the garden, and we find that the humans are actually hiding. And I find that to be so true, not because it's historical, but because over and over in our lives, we find opportunities when we need connection to hide from it. And so I bring up emotional cutoff for you to think about ways in which that has been part of your life story, and in which our church community is an opportunity to do something different than just cut off from the places that hurt us. And so I find that there's this great paradox that our scriptures talk about, where we at that moment have an opportunity to connect to others, and it's fear-inducing and pain-inducing. And when that happens, that invitation to hide is there. And that hiding isn't always just finding a cave and waiting. It can be cut off. It could be anger. It could be rage. It could be living a passive-aggressive way, speaking of others and such, just completely othering other people, making them distinctly different than you, giving people ultimatums they can never meet, or being unrealistic. I heard from a recovery expert this week a definition of an alcoholic. And they said an alcoholic is someone you don't like that drinks as much as you do. And that made me realize that all of us carry a certain amount of imperfection that we would love to change with a snap of our fingers, but we cannot. And that is the sum roll up of all of our church. As much as we depend and love and even are thankful for someone who leads us like James, he is not perfect. I have not been perfect. I won't be perfect. And when I have to get to that point, like that saying, when I realize an alcoholic is somebody I don't like who drinks as much as I do, I have to look at myself and think, well, where are the areas where I need some comfort and some repair in my life, and offer that as compassion to self and to other people. So I invite us all in a closing word here to think about those moments that we do virtually right now, where we pass the peace, and we think about what it means to pass the peace to one another. And depending on what service you attend, people have varying different views on how important it is. And I have attended the Saturday night fairly often in the past, and that one threatens to have the rest of the service canceled once people start hugging, and sometimes it could be a minute to get everybody back together. So I know that that's a value here, but I want us to think about that peaceful moment as an opportunity to recognize that when we exchange any of our comfort and love for one another, what we are always doing is recognizing that we are in relationship that will rupture from time to time. But our invitation as the people of God is to work in ways that repair it, to repair the ones with each other, and in so doing, model that type of repair outside the walls of St. Peter's. Because I don't need to click very far in the news to find all of the opportunities where that repair is needed. And so as I close, I know that there's probably at least 3 opinions of what I've just said. And the first is that I'm naive. So I ask you, if I'm naive, think about the ruptures in your life and find any of the examples in your life where you've repaired something that has gone away relationally. What worked then? And can that work for you now? The second is that I'm crazy, and maybe you're right. I would ask you to reflect on what is it that hurts you to the point where that sense of promise of peace and repair sounds mistrustful. And we live in a very distrusting world right now. And I'm curious if you think about benefits of trusting others, or is there a cost of hiding from other people? And there are some of you who are like, maybe he has a point. And this is my final thought for all of us. Can you take the courage, which is what I am trying to do, to live into those ruptures and to exist in a way that repairs them, and model that wherever you are and with whoever you are? So alongside that, I just want to highlight that overall, I believe our church is developing a new way of making decisions together. It is not perfect. It is not on one extreme, a rubber stamp, and it's not one where we regularly storm off. We are learning to balance the middle, where we might have extreme beliefs and opinions on things that we should do next, but to do so in a way that builds up our body. And I am thankful for the opportunity to do that. And a big catalyst of that has been the way James has led so far, and for some of the wisdom that is on this Zoom call today, and acts this way with all of the people that serve and grow with us. So I'm thankful for everyone here. I am not surprised to see the list of people who are here present and those that will be listening later. You are absolutely valuable to what we do here, and we are thankful for each and every one of you. And I know we have a minute or two here if our other wardens would like to say a quick word. And then final, I am thankful for the opportunity to be your senior warden. It's been something I've done for 2 years now. I am staying on the vestry for my 3rd year. I'm going to complete that, and I'll be around as needed. So I am thankful for the opportunity, and I have learned a lot from it. So at this point, I'll just pause and see if Carter would like to add a quick word, or if Candace would like to add a quick word.
No, my report's in the written report, and I don't really have anything further to add other than thank to everyone.
Yeah, I concur. Thank you so much, Matt, for your leadership, and for James getting us through these last few years. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Matt. I am moved by your report and humbled by it. And so far, I'm very blessed by how God is working with all of us. And I know God will continue to work with all of us. If we're not being blessed, we are needing some self-reflection. Usually, it's usually not somebody else's, the target. So I'm going to turn now to, depending on when you downloaded this, it might said Victoria's name. She had a family event that prevented her from being at this meeting. She was excited to be at the meeting, but she needed to do that. And so Tyler Dixon, who served in both the committees with her, has graciously agreed to step in. And if you more recently got the agenda, it has Tyler's name by items 4 and 7. So I'll call on Tyler to make the report for item 4 on the agenda.
All right, can everybody hear me? Can anybody hear me? I see a bunch of heads nodding. I'm going to introduce the nominees for the vestry and the warden positions. First is the Patty Prokaj for the senior warden, who is actually an appointment by the rector, but we would like your approval for her. Carter Wilson for the warden for facilities. Susan Chenier for the warden for administrative and business matters. Brian Luce as a 3-year vestry term and summer warden if other wardens are absent. Elizabeth Johnson, a 3-year vestry term, and that would give us 11 members of the vestry for 2021. And then we'll affirm the partial terms for Don Conley, Susan Chenier, and Guy Testini. Do you want me to mention the delegates of the convention?
Let's do that separately.
Understand, do that separately. So those
Okay.
are the nominees for the vestry.
So at this point, if someone had someone's permission or was going to self-nominate and met the requirements for vestry service, there could be a floor nominee added to this list. But it is not necessary. But the list is the recommended list from the nominating committee that Tyler was on and the vestry. And so I'm going to ask my helpers to see if anybody's trying to get our attention. I'm seeing nothing.
There was
Nope.
All right, so then I would move that we accept this recommended list for vestry by acclamation, and we can signal that by either clapping or raising your hands. All right, so congratulations to new members of the vestry, and congratulations to Chansa and David Harwell, who were just relieved of this responsibility they carried so well for 3 years. and also Candace Davis, who is concluding 2 years. Now for convention, we have 2 open slots. We had asked one young person who turned us down, and then I more recently asked another young person who just said yes. So we have 1 open delegate slot, and we have 6 open alternate slots. And if you're an alternate, you don't have to do anything unless a delegate is unable to and you agree to. And you're welcome to attend if there's a physical convention in Tucson in October, but you're not required to attend. But if you're a delegate, they want either you or an alternate there if there's a physical meeting. So the person I would nominate as a young adult to be the 6th delegate is Meadow Sandoval. As we've been all looking for 2 more nominees, and she is the first young person that said yes. Would anyone want to second that nomination? All right, so Meadow is,
Susan Chenier.
and there are many people's hands went up. So that she would now, I guess technically we should vote to add her to the recommended slate, but let's see whether that's necessary. And now, is there a 7th person who's not already on the slate of delegates that Tyler's about to tell us that wants to do it? Tyler, why don't you tell us who the 6 are right now, and then see if you want to add your name to that list or the alternate list.
All right, the 6 are, we got Don Connolly, Muriel Hiller, Carter Wilson, Patty Prokosh, Victoria Bray, and that's it. So, and then Meadow.
Is there a 7th person at this meeting who would like to be a delegate to the convention, whether it's in person or virtual in the fall? Carter, you're raising your hand.
Marie is also raising her hand.
Okay. Marie, are you indicating an interest in being a delegate? Yes. Okay, is there
Yes.
anyone besides Marie?
Deborah Quick has her hand up, but I'm not sure what that is for.
Deborah, do you want to say something? You want to?
No, I think I raised it a while ago when you were saying something about voting and it hasn't gone. So
Okay.
that's what happened. Yeah.
Okay. I think the tellers will figure out how to make the hands go down. I don't know how to do that. It does do it by itself after a certain amount of time. So I'm nominating Marie, who is willing to be the 7th delegate, to join the slate as their 2nd. For Marie, yes. Gay Romack, I see various hands going up. So now we have exactly the number we need of delegates. Do we have anybody else who's willing to be an alternate? Yes, Carter.
Gail will be an alternate.
That's fine. You're not supposed to nominate a husband and wife as delegates or on the vestry at the same time, but it's totally okay for a spouse to be an alternate, because it's great to have a willing person in a pinch when you need them. So that's totally great. Thank you. So we can add Gail to the alternate list. Anybody else willing to be added to the alternate list? If it's in person and the presiding bishop is there, you might twist my wife's arm to be an alternate also. But are you objecting to being an alternate, Jane? Now that I'm putting you on the spot in front of, no, that means it's okay. All right, so we'll add another spouse to the alternate list. Anybody else want to be an alternate to convention? We don't know whether it's going to be a physical or a virtual meeting yet. All right, so now I would suggest, since we
James, I see
Phyllis has her hand up.
who?
Susan.
Susan,
Just a quick question. What are the dates again of the convention if it was going to be a live convention?
thank you for asking. It's Friday, October 15th and Saturday, October 16th.
Thanks.
And Phyllis had her hand up. Are you agreeing?
Phyllis,
Phyllis
winner?
agrees as well to be on the
Phyllis?
alternate.
Does Phyllis want to be an alternate?
Yes.
All right, we'll add Phyllis to the alternates. Good. Every year, some of the alternates end up serving for part or all of the convention. And sometimes you run through all the alternates and you're still fishing for somebody. So we make plans and then things happen. All right, do we feel ready to vote on the proposed representatives to convention?
Linda
If-
has her hand up.
Linda, are you ready to vote or you want to say something else?
I will be an alternate.
Thank you, Linda. Excellent. Linda Nicholson. This is a great way to get people involved. All right, we ready to vote? Do all my eyes see everybody seems ready to vote? All in favor of this great slate of delegates and alternates signify by raising their hands. Yay, I think that passes. We are now ready for item 6, which is also Matt Sandoval.
Yes, so we want to just take a moment to thank our outgoing vestry members. So by person, I want to at least talk about Chansa for a second. So I've served with her for 2 years. She completed a 3-year term. So that includes a very crucial time period where we searched for a rector, made a call for a rector, and then worked together to make that transition real. So Chansa, on behalf of everyone in the vestry, we're so thankful for your very thoughtful and often wise recollection of our past decisions and intentions. Very often in our dialogues, you point us back to things we had already talked about. So your ability to recall other details and remind us of what we're here to do is something that is very important to a good functioning team. So we hope someone will kind of take on those qualities because we definitely need them. And you even exhibited them today by reminding us that we should record this thing. So I just want to affirm that in you. And I am so thankful for your call to serve here, in particular during your period of really of support and grief with the loss of your husband. You allowed that to be part of your catalyst for serving here as part of that community. And so I just want to affirm that in you, reflect that we see your commitment to this church and your service as a warden went over and above what is needed. And we are so thankful for your service on the vestry. Second is David Harwell, who I don't think is on the Zoom. Is he on the Zoom? So if not, we're going to record nice things about David that he can look up later. So David, we're going to talk about people in a good way when they're not here. That's totally allowed. So he not only served his term in the same time period as Chansa, which helped us transition with James, but he also took on the lead with communication and a particular committee. And so he was involved in that and did a great job organizing all of that and reminding us our need to present our offering of spiritual growth and transformation in that big stream of Christianity, knowing that there are people who feel like they don't fit in to some Christian settings that are absolutely welcome to be here in our community. And he was very vocal about making sure that we don't forget that that's what some people feel and that that's a target audience, if you will, for our church. And so I am thankful for David's emphasis on that. And in particular, his passion for our service and his dedication, often having to try to make a trek across town in the middle of rush hour in order to make a meeting. Before we knew about this cool thing called Zoom and teleconferencing, he would often roll in a few minutes late with total permission because you've got to work your regular life and your commitments at the same time. And so David showed a lot of resilience and making sure that he could get to our meetings on time. And so we're very thankful for David. And then Candace is leaving after 2 years, and she came in with my class. And during that, she took on a role with the school board and then eventually became the chair of that school board, which she will continue with as she leaves the vestry. And I so appreciate Candace's heart, her deep well of faith and spirituality and willingness to open that up for others to participate in as she experiences God and reminds us of that presence in all that we do and say. And then also for her passion for education and for children, her extra call of duty in the middle of summer to step in an interim role at a very crucial time in the life of our school. Given the pandemic and the change in leadership, we really have been able to keep things together at the level that they are because Candace filled in at a crucial time. And so we are very thankful for her ability to do that. And I just want to pause and make sure I didn't forget anybody, James. So that was the 3 that we're leaving.
You know, the danger is you're always going to overlook some person who did a great thing for the kingdom of God because of your fallible human memory. And so I'm not doing better than you, and I'm moved by what you're saying. And I would point out that during Candace's term on vestry, she went through the discernment process with the vestry and a discernment committee, and both affirmed unanimously that we believe she has a call to holy orders. So, and if I can piggyback on what you said, whenever somebody goes off vestry, I think they should have a chance to have a little recovery, but also they're being released for whatever the ministry God is calling them to then. And so these people have been and are great leaders. Just because they're going off vestry doesn't mean that they disappear from sharing their gifts with us, but they do it in a way that makes sense in the next stage. As we've been so blessed to see, for instance, Sue do after she did quite a heroic stint of a marathon as senior warden, and Tyler as well. So that's my reply. Does any the other wardens, am I missing something? I think we're ready for the big item that we hope to take action on today, which is the proposed parish bylaws. So maybe we should start with initial questions. Then I should share a screen to show the bylaws, because if you want to propose a change to anything, this is your chance. And people may or may not agree with you, and that's okay. That's what Matt was talking about. And if we find out something was a mistake, we can always fix it at a future annual meeting. That's the purpose of creating this process. Or if we miss something. One remark I would say, somebody asked a really good question about a couple of things that were omitted. We didn't reproduce in our bylaws every expectation that is in the national canons or the diocese canons. For instance, Arizona, here's a way Arizona is an unusual state. In Arizona, the rector simply names the senior warden. And I've shared that with the vestry and the congregation, because if you all thought it was not a good idea, I wouldn't want to do it just because I thought it was a good idea. But I've never been in a diocese where that was the case. So therefore, the bylaws say nothing about how the senior warden is chosen. And there may be other things like that. But there may also be something that's missing that we may want to add later, because it can be a living document. So does anybody have questions before we start looking at the document in a little more detail? Are any of my helpers seeing any questions? No, let me ask you, do we want to look at the document in more detail? Is that a worthwhile use of our time as a group? We've all had time to read it. So tell me what you think. Do you want me to share a screen and go through it page by page?
Brian, are you raising your hand?
I'm moving the screen around. No, I'm not. Thank you.
Patrice has a hand up,
It has, yeah.
but we can't hear you yet, Patrice.
Still muted.
How's that?
Yay.
This is just a belated question, a general question. Have we had bylaws before, and is what we were presented with amendments to those bylaws, or is this the first time we've had bylaws?
During the interim period, for the first time, the vestry adopted bylaws. So what we did is the Diocese of Arizona has a canon that says there should be parish bylaws. Vestry bylaws only belong to a vestry, and they can change them by a majority vote at any meeting. So they took those and turned them into these. So your question makes me realize I failed to call on Tyler to introduce the proposed parish bylaws. I asked for questions. I should have done that second. And
That's what I was gonna
Tyler
say.
speak. Go ahead, Tyler. You
All
speak
right,
something.
real quick, over the past year, it was suggested in an effort to strengthen the vestry bylaws that we change them to parish bylaws. That's the first thing. The reasoning for this was because vestries can change their own bylaws by majority vote every month. Parish bylaws are binding on vestries and harder to change without conversation and transparency. Further, these would bring us into best practices set forth by the diocese and required by canon in our diocese. The committee of volunteers from the church included the pastor James, Matt Sandoval, myself, Chancellor Morrow, Phyllis Winters, and Victoria. So everybody has had a chance to look at them. The link was sent out with the email the other day. And the document proposes a basic change from vestry bylaws to parish bylaws and a few changes that are more in line with other parishes and best practices include update to the participation of people 16 to 18 years old. The church cannot exclude from membership people who are not communicants in good standing, and you cannot exclude 16-year-old people from voting. So remote participation, and that's what we're doing right now. And those were the big items. So the goal today is to address any questions about the proposed draft and changes, and I'll let James continue from here.
Thank you, Tyler. The one other thing I would add is to have a truly restricted fund, one of two things has to happen. One is a donor can propose a document that a vestry agrees to that then is a contract that future vestries may not alter. And a donor has to propose a lot of money for what a vestry thinks is good purpose to agree to that. Or a congregation can create a restricted fund. And then to change the purpose or use of the funds would require, in this case, a 2/3 vote of the congregation. So the vestry can't go raid the piggy bank when they're tempted to some year. You'd have to have a big community conversation. So we last year created the first truly restricted fund at St. Peter's, the Rock of Ages Fund. And so that's mentioned in this document. And then this document would allow the congregation, if you wanted to have a music fund or a youth ministry fund, to do that in the future. But it doesn't do that now. It just creates the mechanism for it to happen. So that means you can have an endowment or a restricted fund that you can make gifts to that you have complete confidence will always be used that way long after we've left this earth. It'd be very challenging for it to be changed. And it would be a very careful, deliberate process if it happened. So, and Patrice, your question, there were two versions of the bylaws. One was what you would call a clean copy with a few remarks in the side. The other showed how we changed the vestry bylaws. So you could see where we took the previous language and then we added to it or expanded it. And so the nerdy among us may have done that in the previous time before this meeting, but you wouldn't be able to do it during this meeting. Thank you, Tyler, for your excellent presentation. And this document has been put before you by both the committee and the vestry, so it doesn't need a nomination to be put in motion. Are there other questions? And then I wanted to ask you more generally, do we want to look at the document itself? I want you to feel comfortable voting on it. Are any of my helpers seeing any questions? I have one question for the group. So we never had a established quorum for what creates a parish business meeting. So I, in this document, suggested the least quorum that would seem threatening, which is 10% of the communicants in good standing, which would be 33 people based on our last count of communicants in good standing being 330 people age 16 and older. Is that too small a group? Because if you got a bunch of upset people and you got 35 people in a room, they could do something disruptive, right? How many today do we have in the meeting, Carter and Sue, approximately?
Well, according to my count, we have 54. I still need to know whether Lorelei Lang is by herself. I'm thinking not that Judd's in separate.
Judd's a separate screen.
Okay. And other than that, I'm seeing 54. What are you seeing, Carter?
I agree with that.
So then if it were 20%, we wouldn't have a quorum today. So probably 20% is too high. But do you want to keep it at 10 or make it 15, which would be like 45 people to conduct business? Do you want a smaller group than 45 able to conduct parish business for the whole parish? Carter.
Well, you don't want to make it so large that you can't conduct business.
Correct.
Because I don't want to have to meet annually and have to adjourn to the next year.
And quorum has been an issue in the past, just so you know that, I mean, we used to sweat right, Patrice is nodding. We used to sweat every annual meeting. Are we going to get enough people to come to it that we don't have to send everybody home? So choose that number wisely, I would just say.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is 10% might be not a bad idea. Patrice?
Agreed. And as long as whatever the meeting is properly noticed, people are on notice about what the meeting is about. If they choose not to attend, that's their choice. But to dovetail on what Carter said, you don't want to notice a meeting, start it, and have to not have the meeting because there aren't enough people who show up. So the number of 10% sounds good. Look what we have now.
All right, Carter.
Yeah, and in my experience, if you have a really hot button issue, you never have any trouble getting people out.
Correct. There's language in there about notice for meetings, which Patrice mentioned, and also a certain amount of time that has to lapse. So you couldn't just have a meeting tomorrow unless 50 people showed up and agreed to waive notice. One person could say, no, I don't agree that we can have this meeting tomorrow. And if you indulge me, I'll tell you a very brief story of one time in my 28-year ministry, a vestry was upset about something that it had incomplete information about. So some people on the vestry wanted to immediately have a meeting about it the next day. And people said two things. One, we don't have enough information to have a meeting. And two, we have a requirement in the parish bylaws that say we can't have a meeting on less than, I think it was 72 hours notice, unless everybody agrees, and we don't. And then the whole reason for the meeting disappeared in the intervening time. So the reason for a quorum requirement and a notice requirement is to prevent upset people from causing further upset when they don't really have the ability to make a good decision for the whole parish. And so there's language in the bylaws that would preserve everybody's sanctity in the congregation as agents and also on the vestry. Other questions? Or let me ask you with a big question. Do you want me to share a screen and go through the 20 pages page by page? I'm seeing no's. Do you feel ready to vote on this now? Because once you vote on it, it'll take a 2/3 vote to change it. And I would say the US Constitution barely passed by 2/3. It was difficult. So it's deliberately higher than just a simple majority because you don't want an evenly divided parish. So
is that 2/3 majority spelled out in the bylaws?
Yes, to amend the bylaw requires a 2/3 vote of a duly called parish meeting.
Thank you. I must have missed that.
I can tell you a story about that if you're not tired of my stories, but anyway. In liberal Ann Arbor, it was very important to the parish that there be a contested vestry election every year to some people. And because it offended their sensibilities to have a recommended slate and not have anybody lose. And then other people would say, but people who lose an election won't agree to run again. And they're great people. And some people would even leave the parish. So 3 times, I think, they tried to amend the bylaw that required a contested election, and 3 times it failed to get to 2/3 by about 3 votes. And then after that, every year, the committee might recommend a contested election, or they might recommend just the number of candidates we need. And if it was just the number of candidates that we need, I'd say for this to be voted on, the congregation by 2/3 has to agree to temporarily suspend the provision requiring a contested election, and everybody's hands would go up instantly. But they never changed the bylaw. So that's my story about why it matters. Mary Lynn, you have your hand up.
Actually, it's Rick, but he's sitting right here.
Sorry.
He was talking about the quorum. He wants to make sure that the 333 adult communicants deal with each member and not each family.
Correct. A communicant is an individual. A communicant in good standing is someone who for the year previous, unless for good cause prevented, has been faithful in praying and giving and serving for the kingdom of God. So right now, in the last time we counted 330 16 and older people who we believe that to be true of. So it might be a slightly different figure next year. It'll go up and down depending on the size of the parish, or depending on, you know, if people become really inactive, which we don't want. So it sounds like you might be ready to vote on this now. Does everybody seem ready to vote? Are my tellers seeing anybody who doesn't want to vote? Do you want to vote by raising your hands? Do you want to, if you want a secret ballot, you can send a chat message to Carter and Sue. Do you feel ready to vote? So I'll call for a vote now. All in favor, please raise your hands. Have the tellers had a chance to look at all the screens?
Yeah, keep those hands up because Carter and our screens do not match. So we have to actually physically see all of your hands raised or not raised.
And I believe we might be getting is Steve Boyer communicating by chat message about the people? Good.
Yeah. Oh, I got 2 hands there on Linda Nicholson. I'm assuming that's for Bob. Okay, Gretchen McGill just gave us 1. Pat Hoover is the only one I cannot see her hand, or unless she wants to send me and Carter a message. All right.
2 people who voted in the chat, Sue.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, so now I think we're ready for those hands to go down. And now I ask, if you are opposed to these being parish bylaws, please either chat with Carter and Sue if you don't want to have your hands seen by everybody, or raise your hand. And I'll wait for Carter and Sue to tell us they feel ready to proceed.
I'm ready, Carter. Are you ready?
Yes, I had no in opposition.
Okay. Same here.
So we've adopted parish bylaws unanimously. That's remarkable. Congratulations to everybody.
We can't say unanimously until I hear from Steve. So,
Okay.
okay, but pretty darn close.
This is like those, you know, late counting cities that are not done.
Well, Steve has how many? 3?
Yeah, he has 3. It'll still pass, but I
saw 3.
Oh, yep, I just saw
3
3 hands
hands.
come up. Now you can say unanimous, James.
All right,
I saw
excellent.
3 hands in affirmative at the.
Bravo. Well, congratulations, you all. I think this is meant to be useful and help us build trust with one another. And also, if we have moments of confusion or upset, to help orient us to try to act in a proactive and positive manner. Now I want to move on to item 8, to keep the meeting moving. Susan Chenier has been working on understanding our outreach ministries, how the pandemic has affected it, and what maybe we should do going forward. So I'll call on Susan to make a brief oral report about that activity.
Thanks, James. Is it possible for you to share that one screen of my report?
Yes,
While I
it'll
do
take
this?
me a minute. Yes, it'll take me a minute. I'll start working on that.
Okay. Then I'll just start talking until the screen comes up. We have a very small group of people that have been put together by the vestry to take a look at our outreach programs. It's a great combination of people that some are new and they've got some new ideas. Some have deep roots at St. Peter's. So great, thoughtful, we've had, I think, 2 or 3 meetings, great, thoughtful meetings about how to move forward post-pandemic and how to support what is going on today. And before I go further, I just want to thank all those people that are currently volunteering in any capacity during the pandemic, because it's certainly been a challenge and we've appreciated all your efforts. At the same time that this is going on, we're also looking at our finances and examining all of the restricted and designated accounts to make sure that we understand what their purpose is and make sure that we are using them appropriately moving forward. In the next month or so, we're going to be sending out a survey to all of you to talk about the future of outreach and to ask for your input and your support of current programs. I hope you will share your thoughts with us, whether it's anonymously or by name. Certainly, if you're going to volunteer, we want your name. Moving forward from that, we hope to have maybe some kind of report in the next, I would say, 3 to 4 months. If you have any thoughts or comments in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me or any of the members on our team. On the call today, Carolyn Booher is here, Muriel Hiller, Patrice, Deacon Patrice, and Deacon Gary. They're all on this small group. And there we go. And we'd love to have you reach out to any of us. We're all in Realm if you need our contact information. Okay, this format didn't look quite like the format that I provided, but it'll give you the basics. The main thing I wanted to identify is you see those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 highlighted programs. Those are the ones that are currently functioning during COVID, and they could all use your help. So if you are interested in volunteering either at home or out of your home or providing financial support, please let me know, or as I said, anybody in our committee, or you can certainly reach out to the chairs of those various groups if you know them. And I think that's about it. So if anybody has any questions, I think I'm done.
Am I helpers seeing any questions?
No questions seen.
And I could dovetail on that. The clergy had a great meeting yesterday where we decided to have the challenge to the parish of 10,000 that was in the discretionary fund and creating a budget for an outreach committee to decide how best to use for outreach ministry. And we challenging the parish to double the amount given for outreach during the pandemic year 2020, which was not quite 5, to match our 10. And so if you'd like to be part of that committee, this will help us coordinate what we do going forward. And it will also be led by lay people, not by clergy, although clergy may serve on it. And this will help us continue to be a parish that celebrates and empowers service to people who could use our help and love. Other questions or comments about the outreach report? If we're ready for the next agenda item, I'm going to preface it by saying we spent 90 fantastic minutes in a meeting this large on the budget a couple of weeks ago. So we're not going to replay that here. This is meant to be short and sweet. If you have more detailed questions, Jim McGill, the new treasurer, and Jackie Abel, the former treasurer who continues on the vestry and is the beginning of a finance committee that we need. We'll be happy to entertain those. So I'll call on Jim and Jackie now to make a brief report on what happened in 2020 and what we think could happen in 2021 as an adopted budget.
I will start with what happened in 2020. Thanks very much. I'd like to start by just saying thanks to Matt. This is my first St. Peter's Church meeting. I really appreciated his thoughtful comments about kind of bringing it down to a more personal level and our relationships with each other in the community, but also as it applies to how we interact with our family and the people closer to us. So Matt, that was really a strong message and I appreciate it. So for the 2020 fiscal year for the church, it was, even though as challenging as an environment it was, we ended up with a $4,000 surplus, which compared to a $17,000 budgeted deficit. So we were actually $21,000 to the good. That was even given that we had a significant reduction in contributions. Those reductions were offset by, I would say, a very detailed control of kind of detailed and significant control of the expenses with the church. So we ended up very good. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jackie for the 2021 budget.
I'm not going to go into line by line since we did that a couple weeks ago. What I will say is that this budget is for 2021 is starting with a negative budgeted amount of 25,000. A lot of that is because we're still hoping right now to get some additional pledge contributions. We are running behind last year in terms of our pledge contributions, and we would like to see those that have not pledged to reconsider going ahead and making their pledge this year. We have a few positions that are being reduced. We had a membership committee person or a membership chair last year that is, or coordinator that is being eliminated. And otherwise, we aren't eliminating at this point in time any other positions. We are recognized that all of our air conditioners are getting older, and there is a strong possibility that we may have to replace at least one in this next year. That will come out of the Rock of Ages Capital Fund. But it, you know, the ongoing maintenance still comes out of the operating budget. As far as the youth ministry, the contribution that we got from the diocese for Liz Hank's position went away really the end of May. We did not get a payment from them in June because we had been approved for our PPP loan, and the diocese felt that the money that was approved for that loan should compensate for Liz's position as well. So we may have mixed feelings about their determination of that, but it's over and done. As I mentioned, we did get approval the 1st of May for a PPP loan of $107,000. And we have applied for forgiveness of that loan. We also have been notified by Chase that we could go forward with an application for a second loan, which we need to make a decision about with the vestry, whether or not we're going to get that approved to go forward with that application. Other than that, I think we are in the process also of understanding what the relationship is for the two designated discretionary funds that we have. We met yesterday. We realized that we actually have two funds, one of which does not show on our books, which is the Deacon's Discretionary Fund. So we are making arrangements to get that checking account moved into our church financial information. At the moment, that has about $11,000 in the checking account that the deacons use for their discretionary fund. We also have approximately $19,000 in our church parish discretionary fund. So we are working on merging these over time and defining how they are to be used. Other than that, I have no other comments and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I believe you told me yesterday, Jackie, something that I failed to correct in the report, which is in the outreach report that you prepared. Under miscellaneous is where a $2,000 contribution by St. Peter's to Habitat for Humanity is shown, but it's not labeled as Habitat for Humanity. And then also gift cards that we have available for individuals in need who come to the office was funded from that line. And as a result of our meeting yesterday, we agreed that in the future that would be funded by the discretionary fund rather than the outreach miscellaneous line. So
That's correct.
and that 19 is now really 9 because the clergy, the deacons and the pastor said yesterday, we want 10,000 of the account we have discretion about to create a budget for an outreach committee to use. And given what we spent last year on outreach, and also given that we got about 5,000 in donation, and we also, again, I'll say, are challenging the congregation to increase their giving for outreach by doubling it so that you're matching what we're putting in to fund outreach. Questions about particular funds? Linda?
I didn't think of this at the time of the budget meeting until I looked at my refrigerator and saw something stuck up with a magnet, which were our 2 tickets for the St. Patrick's Day dinner dance. Where is that money that was paid for those tickets shown in the budget?
In the Rock of Ages balance.
Okay.
The Rock of Ages balance.
And we also,
Smidgen is in Pete's Eats, but most of it's in the Rock of Ages balance.
and we did make an additional principal payment last year from the Rock of Ages fund. I don't have right in front of me what that amount was, but because of the PT fundraiser and the tickets, we did make an additional donation to the principal, which was the purpose.
Thank you.
Good question. The other thing that you mentioned about pledging is, yes, there are people in this meeting who probably think they pledged, but haven't actually pledged. But that most years give us a card, but because of the pandemic, you may not realize that even though you're continuing to donate to us, we don't actually have a record of what your pledge is for 2021. So if that might apply to you, Phyllis Winters would be thrilled to hear from you. And that would help our precision about trying to estimate our income. We're basing our precision right now on behavior in 2020. If people continue to support the church the way they did in 2020, where we don't know, or if they told us they're going up or have to go down because of lost income, we took that into account. And that's what it's based on. But we could be wrong. But a really wise businessman once said to me something when I was a young clergy person that has stuck throughout my career, which is, unfortunately, past behavior is the most likely predictor of future behavior. Questions about the budget that we want to address today? Thank everybody who worked on it. I think compared to many of our sister congregations, we are blessed, and we can be blessed this year. I said a year ago, before the pandemic, that even though we passed a budget with a deficit, that I believed we could end the year in the black, and we did. So even this is smidgen higher. And if our income assumptions are wrong, we could turn out to be wrong. But I believe that we have a reasonable chance of ending this year in the black too, because you're all faithful, creative, positive people. And God is also sending us new people like that who need to be part of this church home. So are there questions for the wardens and treasurer that we have not heard yet?
James, can I make a comment too?
Sure.
If people look at the documents, at the balance sheet, I just want them to understand that within the savings account for St. Peter's, the PPP loan amount is contained in that. I'm trying to find where that is, but anyway. It's in the, it says Chase Savings, line 1.1.122. That $238,657 includes the $107,600 that we got from the PPP loan. So we have not spent that per se. It's sitting in our savings account right now.
No more questions? Then we might move on to my brief report. You're all being very good listeners, so I'll try to be brief. I'm very grateful for how 2020 went. I'm particularly grateful for how the vestry and the school board responded to the school crisis, which wasn't solely caused by the pandemic, but which that sort of like poured gasoline on it. And we're going in a good direction with the school. But it's taken a lot of extra effort from people. I'm really grateful for how people have stayed connected that we know about. A little worry about the people we don't know about, and I ask you to reach out to them if you have any capacity to. I want to make a remark about how we budget, which is like the great initiative of Pete's Eats people before the pandemic to help us not have to spend pledge dollars on principal payments on the mortgage was huge in the past year, even though we didn't get to have the party yet. But we're going to have a wild party when we've all got a vaccine. I promise you. I had this great conversation with somebody about the fact that from what I've learned, people are motivated in different ways to become generous, but they're mainly motivated by other people who are generous. And so you don't want to just focus on your annual budget to do all the things that God knows you could do. So I believe that our congregation can give more to outreach than it has in the past because you love and value outreach without short shrifting the operating budget. But I don't believe, therefore, that you should put everything in an operating budget because that caps what you can do. And similarly, to make our facilities as useful and wonderful as they can be, you can't do all of that out of an operating budget either. And there are some people who faithfully give us donations for facility related things because it really matters to them. And so we give them the opportunity to. And there are other people who faithfully donate for various outreach interests and passions they have. And we're grateful for that. And if you have a passion we're not addressing, we want to know about it. So my last little item in my brief report is the way the pandemic changed how we use the worship space. We couldn't have adjusted as inexpensively or nimbly if Steve Boyer hadn't done a lot of investigation and also adaptation. Like the first draft wasn't always the final draft, and getting input from people. And it also made us sort of see our sanctuary anew. Like I had to take all the stuff out of the front of the sanctuary because otherwise we couldn't have the physical separation we needed. And everybody said, it actually looks better this way. Well, who would have thought? But it can't stay exactly that way when we're going back to have regular church. So I created a committee to help us dream about the sanctuary and also investigate. And so we're not going to make any decisions without everybody having plenty of time to weigh in. And we have $0 devoted to it. But given that we have to replace one of the two big RTU units on the sanctuary in the next couple of years, who would like to have a noisier air conditioner than we have now? Please raise your hands. No. So if we want to redesign the air conditioner so it doesn't freeze people on half the sanctuary and keep people hot on the other half, and it's quieter, we need a committee to kind of look into design issues to make the most beautiful, compelling sanctuary that is multi-use that we can make. So I don't have all the answers, but I'm sure because of her gifts and conversation and walking around the sanctuary, whether that Karen Geiger McMillan and Shelley Crispin and other people on the committee. And if you're really interested in that, please talk to us. And John Romack and some others, they're going to just look into what are all the ways we could enhance the sanctuary when we return to using it. And I don't have the answers, but I do know that it's an important space in terms of how we light it and how we may choose to configure it so that it enhances our worship and our community. So that's kind of looking to the future. So don't have the answers to that. Just want to help a committee look into it on all our behalf, and they'll report to us later. And that's the end of my brief report. Now, does anybody have questions for me before we go on to item 12? We're at the hour and 15-minute mark, basically. All right, I'm going to call on Carter to start this conversation because he started the conversation about the mortgage.
Well, some months back, as we were going over the financials, it appeared to me that we had money in the bank that was sitting there. And as was pointed out, as Jackie pointed out, we have almost $240,000 in savings, of which $107,000 is, as she points out, the PPP loan. Now, I disagree with Jackie as to whether or not we've spent that, because according to the paperwork that we've submitted, we've already spent that on salaries, and we've submitted that to the SBA. We just haven't been forgiven for that loan yet, because the wheels of government grind very slowly. But according to the law, as long as we meet the statutory requirements, we are going to be eventually forgiven for that loan, and it will become a gift to St. Peter's by the federal government. It's just a question of when, because there's no way in the world that Congress is going to turn back these loans to the small business community and say, oh, sorry, we changed our mind. There would be a total uproar. So anyway, we have $238,000 in savings, and the balance of our loan is $198,000 and change, of which we have $39,674 in restricted funds. Now, James and I have discussed it, and he's told the vestry that he's comfortable with a 30-day retention in the balance, so that we're not just leaving ourselves bare. And we feel that if we can raise $75,000, because we're going to have to raise $25,000 to pay the mortgage this year anyway. So if we can just triple that to raise $75,000 instead of $25,000, then we can pay off, or should be able to pay off, the entire mortgage, burn the thing, and paint our doors red, which in the Episcopal Church designates that you own the church. That's an Episcopal thing, to paint your door red. And it seems to me to be a doable thing. Now, I realize that this year's been tough, and I realize that some of our congregation is not in a position to do that. But Gail and I are not rich, but we've already received, our $600, and we've been able to utilize that to help the church and to help the poor. We're comfortable. The pandemic did not affect us financially. We're retired. The only thing the pandemic did is we can't go on vacation, so it saved us some money. But there are others that we know have been affected the other way. But we also know that there are others that are on this screen right now that are able to help fund this. And the men's group has backed us 100%. And they're totally in back and really pushing this. And we've been at this now for several months, and there are at least 2 major donors that if the congregation decides to accept this challenge, that there are at least 2 major donors that are willing to make major contributions to this fund. And I just think that that we'd be silly not to go forward with it at this time, particularly with the idea that the current administration is thinking about giving us an additional $1,400. I'm certainly willing to put up my $1,400. I'm not asking anyone here to do likewise, but to certainly, you know, if you're able to think about it. But the men's group looked at the green appeal of solar energy, and it's something that we want to support, but we really believe that it's a couple of years down the line because of the engineering, and there's definitely challenges with the school because of some problems with the city, and also because of the electrical hookups over there at the school. With the church, it's a different matter. We could do it, but there's challenges that we really would like to get involved with, but we think it's really a couple of years down the road. But the vestry is looking for the support here at the annual meeting. And we hope you'll accept the challenge and move forward with this project. And that's about all I can say.
Thank you, Carter. The diocese is eager for us to go solar, but the vestry really prioritizes that as the second priority. Carter mentioned the mortgage, the budget that we all just agreed to. We do need to raise $21,500 for the principal payments on the mortgage through other debt giving, or this budget will have a bigger hole. But we did it last year, so we're hoping that past behavior is a predictor of current behavior. And the total mortgage expense is about $30,000. So that's the one big pot of money, if it wasn't there, would relieve strain on our budget. The other is we spent about 13 on electricity. So it's significant, but it's smaller. And I wanted to call on Matt to say what I think everybody on the vestry agreed with about what we don't want to have happen if we decide to do this. Could you express that concern for the group, Matt?
Yeah, I think that my sentiment shared twice, 2 different meetings, has been that this is an excellent idea. However, we need to be very wise about the timing of such, because we are at this moment, at least in the middle of the pandemic, the first third, the second third, no one really knows. And we have been blessed that we continued through 2020 with basically a break-even financial operation, just to put it as a financial metric. And there are reasons to be optimistic, and depending on which link you click, reasons to be pessimistic about the future of our ability to meet together and resume life resembling something typical. So my concern about the project is not the nature of it or that it's a bright idea, but to seek the best form of timing so that we do not diminish our cash and then run into a scenario where giving impairs our ability to pay our staff and operate our church. And So that's centrally it. It's about cash flow. And that's my concern about finding the right time, which is why we've recommended for this meeting to put it on the biggest radar possible, to have everybody have an opportunity to consider it, for a team to develop a proposed timeline to look into this, knowing that there's a couple things that are very likely to go our way, including the forgiveness of the PPP loan. I understand Carter's point too about that we have spent payroll that justifies that forgiveness. So that is all looking very positive to it. And then determining what the actual amount to pay off our mortgage is, and functionally recognizing, do we want to have the cash? The difference in cash is the interest rate. So are we willing to keep 4.5% interest over time periods so we can keep more cash on hand in case something changes financially with our church and school? That's something that we have to weigh out.
Thank you, Matt. Questions, observations? Look, hoping for my tellers to notice hands being raised. Sue.
So in all of this, you know, there's the school, which has played an integral part of the budget for a very, very long time historically. And there's always been this idea of separating those two, which I think is a wonderful way to go eventually. And I think the vestry has made some moves towards this, just recognizing during the pandemic, everything that's happened. So I'm going to say historically, it's about $45,000. And I know you changed that to a percentage based on income. However, in the budget, historically, it has been $45,000. And I think this year I'll have to go back and look up the number because this just came to me. So what my concern is that the school, which I've, you know, the numbers have decreased over the past year and a half, 2 years. The numbers have gone significantly down, that it has reopened during the pandemic. And Rasha has done a really great job. I think she does tours like 4 days a week for people. She's done a great job of starting to see those numbers trend in the opposite direction. However, that being said, I think the school, I mean, Candace perhaps can speak to this, or somebody from the school board who might be on can speak to it. However, I think the school is in flux right now. So I don't think we know which direction it's going to go in. I want to be positive and say it's going in the right direction. However, there's a great deal of trust being put in that. So I look at a factor of the school is not really stable, I would say at the moment. We have the pandemic, which is not stable at the moment. And although we're blessed with this money sitting there, I learned a long time ago, someone once gave me the phrase that cash is king. And you can get more cash borrowing if you have cash. But if your books say that you do not look good with your cash, then nobody's going to loan you money if perchance you were ever to need it. So I would just be, you know, I think these are wonderful projects. I do think the timing will be of essence. My question is there going to be any rush other than that we're paying 4.5% on the mortgage to doing this quickly? So I guess what I would like somebody to address is, what is the advantage of doing, what time frame are we looking at? And I would be very careful that we do keep some money in our savings account, because we have been in the position as a parish of not having the money, looking down the road, and Jackie can attest to this, that we're looking down the road saying that unless we fix something, we are not going to be able to pay our bills at the end of the year. And so I'm just very cognizant of that larger view. Thank you for listening.
You're welcome. Thank you, Sue. Jackie, you had your hand up. We can't hear you.
Trying to, there. I just want to piggyback on what Sue said. When I took over as treasurer, at that time, the priority was to get the loan refinanced. And I spent a lot of conversations and time working with Thrivent to make sure that we got the best deal for what would work for us. And I know that at that time, the savings account balance that we had in our two savings accounts, one for the school and one for our church, were very important aspects in the review of things. That also became important when we moved all of our banking to Chase Bank and we restarted the credit cards that we needed to have. And Chase Bank was very concerned about our financial position before they approved ultimately the credit line that we wanted to have. So I think we should not eliminate the thought of the impact of this on what our needs are going to be in the future, as far as what I think if we had only had 1 month's amount in our savings account, we would have had a much different outcome. That's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Jackie. Other people's hands up that I'm not seeing?
There was a comment in the chat.
Yes. If interest rates are so low, is there an opportunity to refinance? We're at 4.5. And because we're not a private homeowner in our primary residence, I don't know if we could refinance and get down to closer to 3 or not. But that is a possibility. I also would point out that our current budget for 2021 assumes someone, presumably maybe somebody at this meeting included, is going to raise $21,500 for the Rock of Ages Fund so that we don't have to pay that mortgage out of the budget. So Carter's comment, he said triple it. I'd say multiply by closer to 4, 3.5 anyway. If we raised 75,000, we could eliminate a $30,000 expense from this budget, and this would be a surplus budget. And right now, I would say, Carter mentioned people have interest in this project. I have had 2 specific indications of interest about specific amounts. So if we're trying to raise 75, I'd say I don't see half of it in indications of interest yet. I see maybe 12% so far. But then I know another person's interested but doesn't know how much they would give. So one way to continue to talk about this is if this is of interest to you and you think if we have a community effort that you would participate, please tell me or Carter how much of that $75,000 you want to give. Because then if we know, oh, okay, we already have half of it in hand, it makes it an easier decision to try to get the other half and make this $30,000 mortgage expense go away. Does that make sense to people? Linda, you have a hand up.
Just to put it into perspective, I just ran the math. $75,000 seems like an enormous amount of money, but divided by 330 adults, that's like $228, which comes up to like $4 a week per person.
Right.
When you think of that little amount, 75,000 should be absolutely doable for $4 a week per person.
You're correct, Linda. Now I know that at least a third of our congregation does probably not have any money to give to this. I would guess that they maybe they had to decrease their pledge, they have lost income, or they have disruption, or they're already giving us a very sacrificial percentage of their income and they just can't do more. So I don't want those people to feel any pressure or guilt. But I do believe that if people decide this is helpful and important, those who have the ability to do so will be good spiritual investors and will decide to do so. And so some will give far in excess of dividing it out like you did mathematically. And then some may have to do zero. But we haven't decided to do it yet. I don't think we have quite enough data. All your concerns are valid, but also all the benefits are clear. I would suggest if you have an interest in us moving forward with this, that you please communicate it's an expression of interest, your level of interest in that $75,000 total. How much of it can you take as a chunk? So the Rodenheisers are the 2%. And then another household told me they'd do 10. So that's why I know about 12. So if other people feel like, okay, if we're all going to do it, this is how much I'll do. If you just talk to me or Carter, then we can report later to the vestry if we've gotten to half. Then it becomes a different conversation.
Yeah, the other thing is Linda used the number of adults that we were talking about, as opposed to, I would divide that by the number of people who have pledged as pledging units, which is more like what, like Phyllis would know.
116?
116. So it's
Right
really,
now. But,
yeah.
And then there's some who are currently called regular contributors because we don't have a pledge card on them that give us money every month that add to that figure by at least 20. Maybe let's say about 140 all told regular contributors. Gary, you have a hand up.
I just have a question. Does the diocese have a, I'm not going to say it's a canon, but a recommendation on how much reserve a church should maintain? 30 days seems a little small for me. I'm just wondering what the business, regular, maybe business or the diocesan, whatever it is, what is a good?
Good. Right, I can tell you. 2 months is good. A lot of churches don't have 60 days of operating balance, which for us would be about $85,000. 1 month is skinny. Below 1 month, you get really nervous, as people have said have been the point in the past. And in my last congregation, when it got up to 6 months, people got embarrassed. They were like, we shouldn't have this big an operating reserve. They debated about it. So if you're a church, having too big an operating reserve may inhibit people's generosity, or maybe you're not doing everything God wants you to do. So I would say 1 is skinny, 2 is good, and 6 becomes controversial. That's half of the year of operating budget sitting in the bank.
So then I would ask Jim and Jackie what they think as treasurers about what number of months we should keep in reserve. Just not a binding thing. I just want to know what their opinion is. I agree with James. 1 is way too short for me. 2 I could sort of live with. 3 would be better as far as I'm concerned.
But before they tell you their opinion, I want to clarify a thing. We have about 116 in unobligated operating reserve right now. And so in addition to that, though, we have almost $400,000 in the bank because we have a lot of cash that is obligated to various funds. And so that's part of your bank reserve, but you can't spend the money for a different purpose permanently. But in terms of cash flow, that's part of what Sue talked about. Cash is king. If you look on our balance sheet, we have a very healthy cash balance sheet. So the operating budget reserve question has to be considered in the bigger picture of our total cash on hand at the bank. Now, I'll shut up and have Jim and Jackie express their opinion about 30 days versus 60 days versus whatever.
I kind of my financial background, I tend to lean more conservative and have been in situations on the corporate side where liquidity has been an issue. So I would say that 1 day or 1 month's reserve would probably keep me up at nights. 2 months, I would sleep a little better. 3 months, I think I would sleep very restfully. Jackie, do you have anything to add, given your history?
No, I think I would be very uncomfortable with 1 month. I agree that I feel that at least 3 months for the operations balance would be a good basic minimum.
Which is what we currently have. We're right at 3 months right now for operating reserve
Good.
with 116.
Good. Excellent. Thank you.
But yes, now the carrying cost of that though is the increased mortgage obligation, right? So that's why we're all weighing this. So other questions or observations? We're not here to make a decision today. We're here to discuss this carefully. The other thing I would say about solar is when we decide it's time, the diocese is devoting a lot of resources to make sure parishes have good counsel, good financing options, experience dealing with contractors, etc. So we will certainly take advantage of paying attention to what they've learned. Jim, you had a hand up.
Yeah, is this solar program, would that be those solar panels that we actually own rather than lease?
Yes.
Okay. So we would be expected to make a capital outlay for those upfront.
Yes, although they are willing to help create borrowing for that at an attractive term. So if if you could knock your $13,000 power bill down to zero, and then you created a, I don't know, say a $6,000 debt payment, you still saved $7,000 a year in your budget. So,
okay, thank you.
Sue.
And I'd also like to say, I believe with the new climate initiatives that are happening in the current administration, that I would not be surprised at all if there were more programs for solar going forward. So I would sit tight with that a little bit to see what comes down the pike.
Right. Jackie.
I also just want to put in that if we were looking to borrow any additional amount for solar, even I believe if it was through the diocese, that type of borrowing would have to be approved by Thrivent if we continue to have the mortgage. They have first right of refusal for any borrowing that we do.
Ah, that's worth knowing. They're good Lutherans, though. They won't be unreasonable. Yeah. Okay, do we want to talk about this item more?
I think AD had a quick question.
AD. Yeah, we've gone a long time in this annual meeting and haven't heard from AD. Is he muted? Are we having technical difficulties? Do my Brian or Jane know?
It looks like he is searching for that. Maybe, oh, he gave the hand wave.
Okay. Well, we know our election results. So here at the hour and 45-minute mark, we've completed our agenda. My sense is there's not something else you all want to do in this annual meeting in this format today. And anyway, so if my remark about AD usually has a good joke in the course of any meeting like this. So we haven't heard one of his jokes or funny stories yet. So my remark along those lines, I don't want it to be misinterpreted. So that may be the only thing missing from this annual meeting is a joke or a funny story from AD Klein. So when you see him in person or talk to him on the phone, because he's really good on the phone, he's one of our most gifted people on phone relationship. You might be able to get one of those two things in any encounter with him. So yes, Jane, did you have a hand up?
This could be in the annual report and I missed it, but I just wanted to point something out really quickly that's happening at the church that I didn't see in the report, which kind of has to do with what you said about people being brought in. And that is, while we've been outside at the 10 o'clock every single week, there have been people who have been walking by and who have stopped and joined the worship service. So I know a lot of you haven't been at that, but I think that's really important to note. And several have stayed and talked afterwards and talked about how this was exactly what they needed at this time. So I just think it's important to make note of that.
I appreciate your bringing that up. A lot of people have discovered they really like worshiping outside in our outdoor worship space. Some of you may have not tried it because you're afraid it won't feel like church. It's made me wonder whether when we can resume in the sanctuary, we need to find a permanent outdoor worship service, partly because it's a great public witness. The whole people outside in Litchfield Park on Sunday morning are all aware of us worshiping outside, and it's very positive. And people have actually joined our community because of it. That's a great ending remark. Thank you, Jane. Other things, Gary?
I just wonder if this group would have a vote of confidence, maybe, if that's what it is, to what the vestry has said about the repaying of that loan. So we get some idea of the group that's here, the 45 or 55 people that are here, whether or not that needs to be a number one priority in what we do in the next year. I just would like to see that as just information, because I think it would help.
So did you want to make a motion? I'm not quite clear what your motion is about.
I don't know that it needs a motion. I just would like to see how many people of this group support the vestry, in that's what going to be one of our primary goals for the next year. Does that make sense? Straw vote.
Well, so Susan's putting her hand up. Is it for a straw vote, or because you want to make a motion, or just be called on?
Just to clarify, when you're saying that it's a priority to get it done, or a priority to investigate it?
Good question.
Good question.
Gary's not sure.
I'm not sure.
That's why I wanted you to make a motion. If we have a straw vote, we're not sure what we're voting on, then we'll create confusion.
Okay. So
I think I would agree with a priority to investigate, and it may result in it getting done, but at least we're going to look into it.
Was that a motion, Susan?
I'd be happy to make that as a motion, Gary, if you're okay with that.
I would second that.
Okay, Gary seconded. Susan made a motion that it be a priority for the vestry to investigate the mortgage payoff project. But that's not a decision to get it done, but to investigate. A priority to investigate. And we have a second. Do you all feel ready to vote on that? All right. This is our first floor motion. All in favor, raise their hands. Okay. Have the tellers had a chance to look at all the screens with hands raised? What do the tellers have to say to me?
Can't tell whether AD's hand is raised or not. He looks like he's trying to text somebody on a phone. Thank you for all those. You've made this so easy looking at all these screens. Dawn's driving, so I don't think she's going to raise her hand. AD, is that hand up or not? Yes, excellent. Thank you, AD. All right, I have everybody. How about you, Carter? And I just don't have Steve in the hallway again. In Celebration Hall.
I'm not sure that Carter is still on.
Lost Carter.
I see
there
all
it
but
is.
one or two.
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
All I need is Stephen.
Are we ready for these hands to go down?
Yes, I am. Thank you for leaving them
All
up.
right, now, if you think it is not a priority for the vestry to look into this more this year, please indicate by either raising your hand or chatting a message to Carter and Sue. One of my goals is
I'm
for
good
this
with
to
all
be-
my screens. I'm good with all my screens.
Okay, so nobody thinks it isn't a priority. I take it.
That is
I want
correct.
people to feel comfortable being in the lone no vote or cautionary vote. That's important. Doesn't mean you're right, but you keep us all accountable. So I don't want people to feel inhibited from disagreeing. I also want to point out that the social distancing measurement stickers and foam in the sanctuary, if you haven't seen it and all that, the engineering of it was carried out by Jane Waverick, who's really good with spatiotemporal things. And it won't look that way forever, but it is certainly necessary for worship during the pandemic. And it's remarkable the number of smart grown-ups at St. Peter's who need a little help to realize how far apart a cow is. So that's the rule though, which the children at the school also do really well with. If you say, are you a cow apart? They immediately get what a cow requires. 6 feet somehow doesn't quite compute. So now we're at the not quite 2 hour part. Yes, now Jane has her hand raised.
Sorry, AD called me to tell me what he was trying to say, and that is that we have an agreement that if we pay off the mortgage, that we automatically get a line of credit. So just, I can't tell you everything he said, but he just wanted me to add that to the discussion.
AD is a retired banker, and so he's often looking for creative and great opportunities for us of an entrepreneurial nature. So he could well know about a line of credit that he is telling us about that we don't know about yet. So that's good news. Positive initiative is good. All right, so I feel like we're coming toward a graceful close. And I wondered if I could call on Deacon Gary to give the closing prayer.
Right.
But you're muted, so it's going to be
Sorry.
silent.
Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, it could be a silent prayer, but the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Dear Heavenly Father, we give you great thanks for this productive meeting, for this group of faithful parishioners who have gotten together and spent this time to further your kingdom here on earth in ways that are new, innovative, conservative, and whatever else it is that this Holy Spirit is guiding us in these meetings to do. And we give you great thanks, and we ask for your continual blessings upon our church and our church family. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Great meeting, everybody. If you have further thoughts, you know who to talk to, and you know where we live, and we love you. So thank you all, and I'll see some of you in church. Bye-bye.